Yes, hello, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our October 2022 Ansible Meetup. Hopefully, you are all keeping warm and cozy after having a polar blast on a spring day, spring night, I would say, especially in Wellington with winds and hail and storm overnight, probably call it snow overnight. Here with me are your usual suspects, also known as your meetup hosts. Of course, you have Nicholas Wong, Ashor Benjamin, and Joel Pauling, and our guest speaker that we will introduce later on. Again, we're opening the invitation if you want to be part of the Meetup organizing team, or if you want to share some of the cool things that you're doing in the Ansible space. Come and join us. We're more than happy to welcome you. And speaking of the Ansible space and community, Ansible Fest is happening on October 18 to 19 in person, this time around in Chicago. 2019, it was the last time we did it in person, and now we're doing it back in person in Chicago in the United States. Is there anyone joining here for the in-person event? If so, maybe we can invite you to share some of the things that you learned on the next meetup. But if not, don't worry. It will have a virtual on-demand event as well. That's going to be available, I think, on October 24th, and that's going to be a free registration for everyone. And of course, watch out for exciting news, announcements from the Ansible Fest event itself. So sweet. I'll hand it over to Nicholas for some housekeeping reminders. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
Good. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Nicholas, and just a few housekeeping requests before we get started. This session is being recorded, and if you have any questions, please leave them in the Q&A box. It's the little chat box onto your right-hand side of your screen, and interact with us via the chat box, or if you'd like to raise your hand, that would put you to go online and interact live with us. So without further ado, may I please introduce our architect, Ashor Benjamin, to share a little more.
Thanks, Nicholas. Hi, everyone. So what we're going to start with is quickly go over the new architecture of Ansible Automation Platform 2, what it looks like, and touch on some of the important components within the architecture. So when Feliz, later on, our main guest, runs through the presentation and demos, you'll be able to hopefully easily follow up with him when he refers to some of these components, right? Some of the new things and new tooling. Next slide, please, Joseph. I think there's a little bit of delay, so just bear with me. So the previous architecture that we've all known for a little while now is very much centralized. It was one big application that basically contains everything that we need, and it goes back a long way. And this is how I guess Red Hat picked it up years ago. The web user interface and the execution of the automation, they all happen on the same system, right? So the management and the execution functions run on the same instance, right? And this worked really well for a while. It did, however, bring some challenges. So, for example, flexibility was a little bit difficult. Scaling the automation environment was a little bit difficult. With Tower, if you needed to scale out, for example, you had to add additional nodes. So this gave you both control and execution capacity. And as we know, in most cases, you really only need execution capacity, right? And you end up having extra control plane capacity that you didn't want in some instances. And when you're building automation, you needed things like Python virtual environment. So the tooling or the components that we use is not really part of the Ansible Automation Platform itself. So it made portability a bit of a challenge. It made maintenance a challenge as well. So as you know, there are Python dependencies per automation that we're running. So it becomes a little bit harder to manage and maintain. So what we've done with Ansible Automation Platform 2 is we've decoupled the control plane from the execution environment, right? So this means that we move towards more modern technologies, and we use things like microservice architectures and containerized environments, right? So we introduce some core components, things like Automation Controller to do all the management tasks, and execution environment to actually run the automations for us. When we talk about execution environment, and when you hear Feliz talk about execution environment, what we mean by that is we basically take a containerized installation of Ansible with all the Python libraries, the modules, the collections, all the pieces that we need, all the pieces that a playbook needs and we package it into a container. So what we have now is we have all the components that we need to actually execute an automation. The next slide, please, Joseph. So one of the important changes in the architecture of Ansible Automation Platform 2 is automation mesh. So what it is effectively is it gives me ability to control how and where I want to run my automation. So I can have, for example, one control node and another separate execution node. So this is simple, straightforward deployment that anyone can start with when they're new to automation. And then as your automation grows, your use cases pile up, you can deploy clustered nodes. We have multiple execution nodes. So this gives us, I guess, a lot more scale. It gives us more flexibility compared to what we could do with the previous Ansible Automation Platform. And if we look at the control plane itself, there's two different types of nodes. So the control plane, again, is used to run management functions. So things like updates, managing automation jobs, RBAC control, all that type of stuff. And there are two different types of control planes, or two different types of nodes. There's a hybrid node. So this is the default out-of-the-box configuration, I guess. What means is that I can run management and I can run automation functions on the same node or on the same instance. Right? Great place to start if you're starting small. And then you have a controller node. So this effectively is a node with execution capabilities disabled. So this guy cannot execute automations for you. So as you grow, you want to separate those functions. So you want your management stuff to happen on the control node, and you want your automation to run on one or more execution nodes. Now, if we look at the execution plane, next slide, Joseph, please. No, next click here. Execution plane, we have two different types of nodes. So we have an execution node, which means it can execute automation. So you get it to run automation jobs. It goes and runs it, reports back to your control plane. And on this node, we use execution environment, as I said before. So what that is basically a containerized runtime of Ansible with all the content needed to run that automation, right? We send that unit across our automation mesh, and it fires up Podman on RHEL nodes and runs the container with the automation that we need in it, right? We also have a hop node. This is basically similar to jump host, if you like. So it allows us to have redundancy across that automation mesh that we have, right? So this guy cannot execute automation. Its job is really to direct or to route traffic to the execution nodes, right? So this is good if you have multiple data centers. You set your preferred route to get to your location. If that route fails, you have a second hop node to get to that same location, right? So this is the primary use case of a hop node, to kind of give you that extra resiliency on the execution plane. Next slide, please, Joseph. So if we kind of put all of that together, and we look at an example of what a mesh looks like, we usually start small. So in this case, you'll have, of course, you start with a hybrid node. There's default configuration. So you have one node controller with management and execution capability all together on that node, right? When you install this, by default, that automation mesh that I've spoken about, it gets deployed automatically. So even if you start with just one simple hybrid node configuration. When it comes to scaling, when you need to scale, we basically add one or more nodes as we need them, right? And we can choose to make those extra nodes hybrid nodes or control only, right? And when you add these nodes, they will automatically cluster them together, and you basically have this one big, component, I guess, to kind of control that environment. Now we'll get to a point where you need to scale out. So you might want to automate devices in separate sites. You can have remote data centers, or you can have edge deployments as well. So you can add one or more execution nodes. So this, of course, depends on how much resiliency you want and how much workload you have, right? Then you might want to deploy hop nodes. So again, so hop node is really there only to route traffic and nothing else, right? So this guy can't execute automation. You can use hop nodes, for example, in DMZ sites, where it could be the only way your security team allows into the network. And then, of course, you'll have your execution nodes on those sites to run the actual automation for you, right? And of course, you can have multiple hop nodes. And as I said, you can add another route to your execution plane. So if that main hop node fails, you have another route, another way to actually get to your execution nodes. And what you'll notice from this diagram, I guess one last piece, is the instance groups, right? So it allows us to, I guess, keep everything organized. You can basically run a job template against a specific instance group. So that has the machines, or it has the devices that you want. So in this case, I have 3 instance groups, and I can run my automation against any one of them, right? So that was, I guess, a quick overview on the architecture of Ansible Automation Platform 2. As you can see, there's a lot more flexibility. There's a lot more freedom in the way I want to architect and the way I want to run my automation across that automation mesh, right? So you can start small, you can scale up, you can scale out as you wish, and when you introduce more use cases in the environment, right? Hopefully that was useful and gives you an idea of how AAP2 is quite different to what we've been using for the past few years. And I'll hand it back to Joseph to do the introduction of our main speaker, and then to deep dive into some of these components and how they work together, and how to show you how to build automation using some of the new tooling that we have in AAP2.
Thanks for that quick overview, Ash. Definitely helpful to see how Ansible has evolved into like a more enterprise approach, different use cases now, easier to scale from, of course, its humble beginnings when it was starting as an open source project. And of course, on to the next discussion that we have. Of course, we've invited probably one of the most avid user of Ansible that we know of. He's been using Ansible since 2018. He's no other than Feliz Karnadi. He has automated a lot of workloads, and of course, he has helped us at Red Hat and a number of customers with Ansible enablements in the past few years. He loves Ansible as much as he loves his food. I'll let him talk about it more later on. And he also thinks that if something has an API, it should be automated. All right, let's hear more from, of course, no other than Feliz Karnadi. Feliz, I'll let you share your screen.
Right. Can everybody see me? Yeah. Hi, everyone. So let me start to share my screen. Here you go.
You can see it, Feliz. All good.
Yep. Where's this? What? Am I clicking the wrong button here?
You can see your screen.
It doesn't go into full screen mode, but okay, doesn't matter. Okay. Right. Thanks for the introduction. So maybe a little bit about myself first. Yes, my name is Feliz Karnadi. I came from Jakarta, Indonesia, and I've been living in New Zealand for more than 6 years. I have 2 kids, so they keep me busy tidying up toys every single night. My hobbies are probably not too interesting to share, but other than that, what Joseph has told you guys, that I do love my food, and that's a picture of soto Betawi. It's one of the delicacies from my hometown. And yes, my family, we like to go out and try to find some good food. And yeah, and at home I do spend maybe more time than I should on computer. But and a little bit of fun fact. So my wife was on MasterChef New Zealand 2022. So that shows how much my family loves food. I currently work in SAS IT as an automation consultant, mainly focusing on Ansible and Terraform and Red Hat portfolios. So if you're not familiar with SAS IT, so we are one of the well-known IBM Power Managed Service providers in the ANZ region. So what I mean by power is the power architecture, like Power 8, Power 9, Power 10. So the OS is IBM I, or what used to be called AS400. and also AIX. SAS IT is an IBM and Red Hat business partner, and we've been around for almost 50 years now. So our main office is in Green Lane in Auckland, but we also have people in Wellington and Christchurch. And recently there's a lot of focus on the hybrid cloud, so automation plays a big part of it. Before SAS IT, I was a Red Hat solutions architect for Ingram Micro New Zealand, and I was also an open source tech specialist at IBM GTS. So yeah, I've been in the Red Hat space for years. And for Ansible, as Joseph mentioned, I've been using it since 2018. So yeah, all right. So okay, so that's my introduction. So let's start with the really important stuff for today. We're going to be talking about Ansible Builder, Ansible Navigator, on the new ways of building automation content. But before that, it's probably a good idea to really explain what's happening in the Ansible open source world. This will help to set the context for the demo today. So a lot of Ansible users today are still using Ansible Engine version 2.9. And when you install 2.9, you will have a lot of modules, community modules, thousands of them, in fact. So you can just simply use them in your playbook without having to download additional collections. Now, that's going to be changing to what we call Ansible Core. And right now, it's actually already on version 2.13. The command like Ansible and Ansible Playbook is still the same, but under the hood, your community modules are no longer installed. So it will only have some of the core built-in modules. For example, the copy module, file module, Linux users, Jinja template, and stuff like that. But things like VMware, AWS, and others, they're all gone. So if you want to use them, you have to download the collections yourself. So why is this? So I think there are various reasons, but maybe one of the key reasons is maintaining those thousands of community modules as part of the release cadence becomes too hard. So there could be like broken, no longer functioning modules. So it makes sense to actually remove it from the package. That's the wrong button again. Having said that, if you use RHEL 8, at least for today, you can still install Ansible 2.9 from either pip or yum. If you use yum, you need to enable the repo and the name, the yum package has to be quite specific, as you see on the screen. Otherwise, if you just do yum install Ansible, that will actually give you Ansible Core instead of Ansible 2.9. All right, a little bit about the Ansible branding. So if you go to the Ansible website, you'll see Ansible 5, 6, and 7. What do they mean actually? Those numbers just map to the specific Ansible packages, as you can see on the screen. So just need to be aware of that. Okay, so now let's talk about the existing way of building content. Today, if you have a Linux VM, you install Ansible package, be it version 2.9, 2.12, 13, or whatever, then you have to add collections and Python libraries on it to make sure that you can use the modules that you declare in your playbook file. Now, this is fine if you're just using Ansible for yourself and the VM is yours. You don't really need to automate a lot of, different types of managed nodes. So you probably never encounter any dependencies issues. But there are some potential issues with this kind of approach. Python libraries can create conflicts with incompatible Ansible modules, and it can be difficult to have one Ansible control host to do all types of automation. Isolating libraries can be challenging, and if you use Python virtual environment, that can be tedious. So the question is, how do we actually share automation host with its installed libraries and collections? Do we actually share the VM to someone else? Well, of course you can do that, but there are better ways of doing it. Now with Ansible Tower, as Ash already mentioned, if you want to scale and you want to have multiple Tower hosts for different types of automations, That means you have to create more tower instances, and that will create more overhead for your team. So, so what's the solution then? So it's really about containers. So introducing execution environments, of what we call EE. So it is a portable Ansible package, if you will. It is a Podman container that has a certain version of Ansible Core with the Python libraries that you need, with the Ansible collections that you need to run your automation workloads. So why a container? Why EE? So basically, with a container, it is your Ansible runtime becomes really portable with all the packages and the libraries that you need. You can easily share them, and maintaining lifecycle is also easier. It is very lightweight compared to a VM, and we don't have to deal with virtual environments anymore, right? So you can easily mix and match which Ansible version goes to which collection and which Python libraries. This definitely solve the dependency issues. But I'll probably have to give you a heads up because we are now starting to use containers, so there will be some overhead. And when you create automation content, and of course, it requires some basic knowledge of Podman. So the tools that we use to build and run and maintain the execution environment is the Ansible Builder and Ansible Navigator. And we're going to do a demo for those tools today. It is good to know that the way we call Ansible Playbook commands will be different, slightly different. This table will give you summary on some of the most used commands. So, and for the Ansible ad hoc command, that's still not changing. It's only when you use the Ansible Playbook command will be slightly different. All right, so let's try to explain the flow of the new build method when you use CLI. So to build an execution environment, you use a tool that is called Ansible Builder, and you need a Linux host to install the builder. To run the execution environment, you will need Ansible Navigator. So of course, you will also need a Linux host for the Navigator. Now the builder and the Navigator can be in the same host. If you do that, you don't need to use container registry or Ansible Private Automation Hub if you have Ansible subscriptions. If you separate the builder and navigator hosts, obviously you will need the container registry to store your containers. Now, if you look at this diagram, assuming that you have a separate builder and navigator host, first, you need to build the execution environment or the container using a builder specification file. In there, you define which Ansible-based image to use, which Python libraries to install, and which Galaxy collections to install. And then once you're done with the build, you push the container to the registry. And the registry can be local, can be a remote, or can be inside the Automation Hub. And once you have your playbook ready, you run it using Navigator, and then you configure your Navigator settings to find the execution image that you need, the inventory file to use, and some of the other configs that are needed. So don't worry if you don't quite get it yet. We're gonna do the demo shortly, and then you'll see some real examples of it. Now, if you use Ansible Automation Platform 2, all operations are pretty much done via the controller GUI. So you will use Ansible controller to execute the job template. And in the back end, it's actually the execution host that will use the Ansible runner to interface with the execution environment. So to inject the playbook and other settings and run the playbook. So in this case, you don't really need an Ansible Navigator host because you have execution hosts. Just a quick slide to show how to install the tools. So simply use yum or pip. Of course, if you have RHEL subscriptions, you have to enable the repo first. Right, so just a quick recap before the demo. This is just the 1, 2, 3 of building the automation content. So number one, you got to know your automation target, the type of the managed nodes, sorry, of the typo there. What components to use, like the Ansible modules, Python libraries, and collections, and how to get them. Is it from Git, from Galaxy, etc.? And second step is build your EE using the Ansible Builder. And the third step, once that's done, push to a Podman registry or just use local cache and then use it with AAP2 or use Ansible Navigator. Right, so demo time. So let's make this bigger. Is it big enough for you guys? Okay, so actually for today, I have two examples. I have an EE for Azure, and I also
Hi,
have
hi,
an
Feliz.
EE
Sorry.
for,
Are
yes,
you are you able to zoom in just a little more?
yep. How about this?
Awesome. That looks good. Thanks, mate.
Okay, so yes, two examples, Azure and VMware. So let's start with the VMware first. So here I have a specification file for the execution environment. It's simply called execution environment YAML. So over here, you can see I define my base image. Which one do I want to use? Do I use the minimal or the supported ones? So the difference between them, the supported ones have some collections that are supported by Red Hat. For example, AWS collection, Cisco collection, and some other stuff. The minimal, as the name suggests, is just minimal. It's it's very basic, not much in there. And then on the specification file, you also define your dependencies. Which Galaxy collection you want to install and which Python libraries you want to install. So let's have a look at them. For the Galaxy collection that we want to install for this demo, we just simply install this one, community.vmware. So if you go to Ansible Galaxy portal, you can see the collection over there, and if we look at the the Python libraries, so the PyVim is the one that I want to install. Not installing this, that's commented out. So there are also some additional build steps that you can do on the prepend and the run. So prepend is pretty much before these dependencies are being actioned. So this will run, and then after that, that's the append. So I'm just putting some simple examples here because actually I do not need to do anything on my container. All right, so let's build it. So to do that, you just do Ansible Navigator build, and then the name of the container image. Oops, sorry. Supposed to use builder. There you go. I know I missed something. And it's completed. And now if we want to push this image to the container registry, first I'm going to show you the images that we have on my VM. So there you go. We have the localhost v5, which is it's actually still the same with the v4 because I didn't do any changes there. and I'm pushing it to the my Ansible Automation Hub, which if I go here, this is my Automation Hub, part of the AAP2 installation. Let's find that image. It's this one. And you can see version 5, which we've just pushed. So let's have a look at another example, which is the Azure one. Very similar to the one that we use for VMware, but this time I'm just using the Galaxy requirements. I don't need to install anything from the Python VIP libraries, because for Azure collection, the requirements for the Python libraries is already part of this collection. So it's already there. Okay, so now the second demo that I want to do is the Ansible Navigator. Go to this. So Ansible Navigator can be run as a text user interface or a TUI, if you will. So let's do that. Show you how it looks. So here we can explore some of the collections we already have in the system. For example, I want to explore what images I have in my VM in the local cache, for example. Here we can see the EE supported and EE minimal, right? So let's have a look at the EE supported RHEL 8, which is the latest one. So that's number 9. So we navigate using colon and then we use the number 9. So here we can see what are the collections inside that supported EE image. So you can see the supported ones contain some of the supported collections by Red Hat. So it has AWS, Cisco, Arista, Juniper, Red Hat, and VMware. So this is new. I haven't seen that before. I think it's recently added. So, but the demo that we are using today, we are actually not going to use this supported collection. We were, as you can see from the builder spec, we will use the community VMware collection. But we can also explore the Python packages inside this execution environment. So it contains some stuff there, some general information about the image. So it's actually a RHEL 8, 8.6. And okay, let's have a look at the one that we've just built, which is 15. See, because I'm using the minimal image, so it basically doesn't have any other collections other than the one that I specified in the requirements YAML. So this makes the container really lightweight, only contains the stuff that I want. And then same thing with the Python packages. If we see the PyVim, it's there, Vim. And when we install Vim, actually it installs this one as well. And for the Azure, we can have a look at that as well. Oops, there's an error. Okay, I need to check with that one. It's not supported with Ansible 2.9. All right, probably that's a bad example. So let's ignore that one. Sorry about that. Okay, now let's run a Vmware Playbook. So here I have a simple playbook just to basically explore a VM facts of this particular VM in my VMware lab. So I got the playbook already set up like this, and now I want to run it. Oh, but before I run it, I'm going to show you the Ansible Navigator configuration file. So over here, basically we define how we want to run the Ansible playbook command, if you will. So which one is the playbook, which one is the inventory, what's the Ansible config to use, and what's the image to use. So over here, I give 3 examples of how we define the image. This one means we're going to pull and run the image from our private automation hub. While the first 2 examples shows that Ansible Navigator will pull the image from the local cache, not from the Docker registry. Okay, so now let's run it. I'm just gonna type Ansible Navigator run. So this is a text user interface, so it is interactive. So you can see it gives us the the real-time output of the playbook execution. So I'm gonna type in 0 to go to that play, and then inside the playbook I have 2 tasks. So the first one is the get effects, of course, get effects of the VM information. You can see here. The second task is basically display debug. So yeah, if you have multiple tasks in your playbook, you'll see those ones here, and then you can just simply go to the index number to have a look at the std out details. All right, so if you like to run the Ansible playbook with the old ways using std out, you can actually do this. So you don't have to go to the TUI. So with -m std out, you can see the std out output directly on your terminal, so you don't have to go to the TUI anymore. So it's really up to you on how you want to run it. Right now, I want to show you how we run the how we can replay the artifacts of what we call it. It's basically, when you use Ansible Tower, you can have a look at the old history log of your old playbook execution. Now with Ansible Navigator, you can do that as well from the CLI. So let's replay it. So
Yeah, this is one of my favorite feature now,
yeah,
Feliz, because before he just like play a
yeah,
long list of logs. Now it's more readable, easy to navigate around.
yeah. So before, basically, you have to pay for Ansible Tower to get your history logs.
Correct.
So you can
Mhm.
get it for free with Ansible Navigator. What's the image that we use? There you go. See, you can see the replay. So very useful, especially after you've run so many playbook executions in the past, and sometimes you just want to review the past ones.
Mhm.
So this is a good way to do it. I think that has a big value. Right, let's see. Okay. Make sure I don't miss anything. So yes, we've done the Navigator, Builder, Navigator, the TUI versus std out, the settings, and replay artifacts. Right, so I think next I'm gonna do the quick demo of AAP2, the controller GUI. So just a quick summary. So make it bigger. So using CLI, as you saw, we need the Ansible Navigator tool, and then we have to prepare the playbook, the image, the inventory, and then use Ansible Navigator run to run your playbook. With AAP2, we no longer use the Ansible Navigator tool because we use everything from GUI, but we still need to create the execution environment, of course, using the builder. And then we create the job template, as you would do in Ansible Tower. But inside the job template, now you also need to define the execution environment inside the job template and launch it. So let's do that quick demo. Let's zoom in so you guys can see it better. So yeah, the layout looks very similar to Ansible Tower if you have used it before. Of course, the dashboard now looks a little bit different. The history, the past play history that you used to see in the bottom is now in tabs like this one. Yeah, we can have a look at this one particular dead joke. What kind of music do planets listen to? Neptunes. Okay, it's a good one. There are some new stuff here. You can see we define our execution environment. So for vSphere, it's the one that we created. It's here, and then basically we declare where we get it from, which version, and then how do and then the pull strategy as well. There's a topology view, which is very useful to check the health status of your control node and execution nodes. In my lab, I have one control and two execution nodes. I don't have a hop node instance group. Yep, I do play around with the instance group in the past, so they're still there. Yeah, other than that, it's really similar to Ansible Tower. Now the survey page looks a little bit different now. So if we go here, for example, this particular job template that we want to launch, so you can see if I click edit here, you see I have to define which execution environment that I want to run. And if I do have some survey, this is the page where we edit the survey. Looks somewhat different with the previous Ansible Tower. So you can edit it like so. But now let's just run it. Click launch. Check the facts for this one, then click launch. So behind the scene, it's calling the execution host, which calls the Ansible runner to interface with the execution environment and gives the output back to the Ansible controller. And there you go, we have the std out. If I click on this, of course, you can see some of the details. Like so, this is the VM facts. You can see workflow also just slightly different. Let's give you the workflow visualizer page. So this is where you can edit. For example, if you want to link this with another template, dummy tasks, there you go. Connect to another dummy tasks. And yes, so just slightly different compared to Ansible Tower. Now, I would say that this new Ansible Controller GUI is much more responsive compared to the old Tower. So yes, I pretty much think that this is much better than the old one. Okay, that's the end of the demo. Hopefully that has been very useful for you guys. I think before Q&A, there's one more slide that we want to discuss. So probably a good idea to have some ideas of what's going to happen to .9. So I think I don't want to comment too much on this one because I think Red Hat can explain this better than me. But I think there's an expectation for the community to embrace the new ways, and get used to have the core modules only when you install Ansible. So in fact, if you use RHEL 9 today, Ansible 2.9 is out of scope. So you pretty much start with Ansible Core. That means install the libraries and the collections that you need yourself. Now, at the moment, 2.9 is still available, and we know a lot of people are still using it. But if you ask me until when, I'm not sure it will eventually be an end of life. So yeah.
So Feliz, just on that, with rel 9, we're not packaging 2.9 at all anymore, app streams or otherwise. If you want to install kind of the what's now called Ansible base pip, can still do that, but just like any of the using stuff on rel, kind of forcing users to go to pip rather than through RPM really drives home the fact that, hey, you're using community version at this point outside of our support scope. And if you want supported versions, then yeah, you can pay for an AAP2 sub and use an execution environment that has that older version in it. So yeah, it's not as if it's not there. It's just you have to use pip if you want it in rel 9, which again just makes it more obvious that you're using community.
Okay. Thanks, Joel. Yeah, that's good information. All right, I think that's the end of my part. Joseph, I'll give the floor back to you. I'm gonna stop sharing now.
Thank you for that, Feliz. And yeah, as Joel said, there will be changes in how we deliver the packages for rel 9 and also on the latest rel 8.6. So that's going to be mainly on Ansible Core rather than the previous Ansible engine. Yep. So any question from our audience? Feel free to post it on the Q&A.
They've been very quiet today.
Yep. I think they're still digesting the changes that's happening around, especially in the way we deliver it. And for me, being an Ansible user as well in the past, it has like streamlined some of the main challenges. Basically, tried to address some of the main challenges that we had on the previous Ansible versions, even on just using Ansible Playbook itself compared to Ansible Navigator. The way you view the logs, the way you troubleshoot, it's way much easier rather than before, where you like try to hunt the errors and whatnot on the logs. So that definitely helps moving forward. And yeah, and one of the, as I've said on the chat, one of the things that we're looking forward into is self-service catalog. So I think for an automation platform to be complete, that kind of like helps us, especially me, especially us who's trying to write playbooks, trying to automate things, making people do it themselves, kind of like allows us to focus more on doing more automation rather than running it for them. So once we have that self-service catalog, I think it's going to be on tech preview on Ansible Automation Platform 2.3. So that's definitely something to look forward to. And we just have one question from Greg. Good to have you, Greg. And his question basically is, are EEs basically containers in which a single playbooks run? Who wants to take on this? Are EEs basically containers in which a single playbook is run?
Yes, they're containers. So all Ansible Navigator is doing is abstracting away the container tools. So Feliz showed you Podman, so he used a couple of Podman commands in his demo, which is interacting using the container tools directly. But effectively with Builder and Ansible Navigator, you as an automation engineer don't need to understand what's happening with the containers. If you are container friendly, then you can go ahead and use the Scopio and Builder and Podman tools directly with the execution images, because they are just Docker v2 compliant container images, which also means you can run them anywhere you've got a Docker runtime, which is great. And they always run the same as well as what you originally crafted them on.
I want to add some more comments on that as well. While a single playbook may not be, when you write playbooks, you can use include row, include play, include task. So in fact, you can run multiple playbooks at once. But yeah, it's just one-time execution, like you will run it with Ansible Playbook, right? Your main playbook can be one playbook. But inside that main playbook, you might actually branch to other playbooks because you could play, for example.
That's right, Greg. As they alluded to, basically one task will need one execution environment for that one job or one task that they're trying to automate. That makes it easier to ship those execution environments for specific use cases. For example, if it's a Windows automation, you don't have to include Linux modules on that execution environment. Rather, it's just a Windows. So it's easier packaging, more lightweight, focus on that specific job or use case. So that's what execution environments are, very specific execution environments for any use case. Going to the next question from Benedict. When a play is running, does AAP2 have real-time STD out, or do we still have to wait until the play is finished before we can view the standard out? Feliz.
It's real time, as you saw from the demo.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's just like, if you use Ansible Tower, it's the same behavior.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not real time, probably you need to refresh your browser, clean the cache. That can happen after a while.
Yep.
So I will add that with Ansible Navigator, you are getting artifacts created now by default. So you will get the JSON replay will be logged out if you haven't specified a default location into the current directory you're in, which makes it much easier for figuring out when stuff has been run and what actually happened, because it's automatically logged locally if it's not part of an AAP2 deploy, which is helpful. And if you wanted to run it with the old style Ansible Playbook kind of behavior, you just run it with -- standout run, and it just behaves like the old command effectively.
Thanks for the question, Benedict. And we have a question from Barry. Hi, Barry. Is there any way of resizing the AAP2 output when you zoom to the JSON from an exec step? It might be pertaining to, for the output on Navigator or the Automation Controller logs GUI as well.
I'm not really sure how to answer it. Is it resizing the output? What do you think that is, Joseph?
It can be.
This is related to a question Barry had last week, I think, where he inside of AAP, if you the icon that used to be the full screen icon in the old tower is a little bit different now. It's still there, but it just looks a little bit different. And that's just a browser Control Shift ++ minus if you want to read. That's a browser function. Yeah, I think that's what you're asking, Barry. It is there. I guarantee you, if Feliz brings a screen up, you'll be able to find it for you. It's definitely there.
Maybe Feliz can try it out later, or we can show it to you later as well. Thanks to the Barry. And if you're pertaining to Navigator, you probably see the different task number and all that. If you click on those, it will give you some more details. That's also one thing that help us expand what's on the task that's on Ansible Navigator when you're running it on the command line. One question from Uday. In the automation mesh design, can we use multiple hop nodes for a single instance group and a single hop node for multiple instance groups? More of an architectural.
Yes, in 2.3. I think this is one of the Kubernetes upstream things that we've been trying to keep in sync. Because when we released 2, we targeted the operator-based deployment of Ansible Automation Platform to be an option, but the upstream wasn't quite keeping up with what we were pushing. And so there's been a few things, including the basically load balanced hop nodes is one of those things, which I think is basically what you're describing. Please type in the chat if it's not. So that basically means distributing connections through multiple hop nodes to an isolated site. And that is something that should be available in 2.3. Don't quote me on that. But that's an upstream change. There's a lot of Kubernetes specific features in the upstream that are reflected back in the 2.3 AAP product release that will basically shore up some of those shortcomings. As I said, we were kind of beholden to what was available to be pushed into the upstream. And so 2.3 release, the targets upstream that matches, a lot of that's now in the main community version, which means we can expose them back in the product without carrying out of tree patches, which we hate to do. So that should be something that's in 2.3, but again, we're still a month away from release, so don't quote me on that.
Is it going to be released on the Ansible Fest, you think, Joe?
Generally, that seems to have been the tradition.
Yeah, that's why you need to tune in, even on the virtual on-demand Ansible Fest edition. There's lots of good news and probably different use cases as well. That'll be good. Alrighty. Any other question? Let me just double check. All right. I think that's all good. And just reading through the poll results, automation toolings. 82% of the responders says they're using Terraform. Wow, it's a good thing that Ansible and Terraform blends in really well, goes in really well. It's a good, perfect combo when you want to like simplify your automation platform as a whole. Sweet. All right, we have 3 minutes left. And again, is there any last few words from you, Feliz? Thank you so much for giving us a good view on what's the latest on Ansible Automation Platform 2. Any last words?
I think it's been a good experience to basically share, how people can get started really quick on Builder and Navigator. So maybe on the future meetups we can do more demos on the use cases. So it will be more interesting, I would say.
I'm also looking forward to that, and probably you are going to be doing in person the next time around. So if you want to host or if you want to help organize the meetup for us, make sure you contact us. And if you have any other further questions that you still have, or you probably want to like have more enablement workshops, we're running a lot of Ansible workshops for you. Joel is running most of them, so feel free to contact us, and we can help organize that for you. Sweet. So if there's nothing
quick question
else,
on the workshop, Joseph.
Yep.
Is the workshop already based on the Navigator and Builder, or is it still based on the Ansible and Ansible Playbook?
No, all of the workshops are all being rebased to AAP2 as of months ago. Yeah, they're all now all 6 of them. So there's a security one, Windows one, Linux one, smart management, so satellite and Linux. I've missed one, networking.
Right.
So they're all based around AAP2.
And the best thing about that, of course, is that we run that for free for you. We have labs, we have actual hands-on experience on those kind of workshops. So feel free to contact us. All right. So if there's nothing else, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. It's really a good turnout. Thank you for staying. Most of you stayed. And again, thank you to Joel, Nicholas, and Ashor, and of course, Feliz. And hopefully next time around, join us again, and we'll have you on the meetup as well. So thank you, Feliz. Just to end, I'll share this with you. Thanks, Feliz. Right? Can you hear that? No.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thanks, everyone. Have a good one. Enjoy the rest of your week.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.